So this session, ideally, I just compiled the art of public speaking and tips on writing successful applications. And I noticed some of you did actually do well in some of the small opportunities I shared actually online to engage in. So I'll just start by sharing the different areas of concentration or different engagement that one can engage in when doing actually engaging in a public speaking event, whether it's a general audience within the community or a high level engagement. So ideally, so just to start, so I'm going to be speaking out and just sharing in, and then as usual we can have a different conversation on different experiences from each one of you, and how best to all of us to just share that information amongst us. So just to share a couple of tips on public speaking that mainly I think I've come to experience myself within the different engagements, and this is mostly because public speaking is a learning arena. I mean, no one is really at the end of the day really that conversant. Every day you learn a new tip, every day you learn a new asset to add to your speaking skills. So the first tip is basically to know your audience. Who are you actually speaking to? And this majority reflects on knowing your audience age, gender proportion, how many young women or young men are in the audience, or the elderly, and even the different educational background really matters mostly when you are doing a public speaking event, because you need to actually know the level of education the group is involved in. The way you would speak to students is different to the way you speak to university students, unlike the way one would speak with students from primary school or students even from nursery school. There's a lot of variation on how you communicate your message, but also the nature of the social status really matters, because ideally the way you plan to speak to your age mates or different people in a community that are from higher ranks, I mean the ones who are mostly well off, and the ones from different villages in the rural settings, it really differs a lot on how you have to communicate that message. You can't speak the same way in all settings. You have to know how best to manage how you speak, how you relay your message also really matters, and even different rank officials. So how do you speak to an ambassador versus how do you speak to your dad or your best friend at home? So those are two different things on when it comes to public speaking. There's a different ranking that is involved, especially also if how you speak to an official in a public event versus how you speak to an official on an informal event. You might be able to address someone by their first name, ideally in an informal event, casual setting, but when it comes to a high level event or a public event, you have to start with a particular title the person has, and this creates a sense of formality and a sense of trust, but also a sense of respect to that particular person. The next tip will be rehearse. So I think this is something that majority of the people always do. I mean, even I myself, I rehearse countlessly, especially when it comes to different session I'm supposed to speak to. I mean, this is for me a much more informal setting, but like unlike if I'm in an audience speaking in a public event, even if it's a Zoom speaking event, actually, I actually have to rehearse. And you can do this on your own in front of a mirror or just with a notebook, but just to be able to ensure that how well are you disseminating the key points that you want the people to capture, and how well do you hear yourselves actually speaking? Because when you do a public speaking event, especially if you're doing it with the mic, I'm not sure if everyone has a similar experience. Actually, you could hear your own voice, and if you're really making sense or if you're not making sense. And I think that's the opportunity for you to adjust to a different approach of relaying your message. But also you should practice with distractions. This is very important because ideally when you're speaking to an audience, and I mean, public speaking can even be within a Facebook Live or Insta Live. That's all public speaking, and distractions are everywhere. Someone can send a message or just a comment, and it might totally distract you from your speaking engagement. So if you're already confident and be able to know how best to speak within distractions, and you can do this while the television is on or while someone else is speaking, but you're just practicing your own speaking notes. This helps you actually maintain that consistency. Majority of the public speakers these days often lack that consistency, and I'll give a good example of the last year's engagement I was in for the African Leadership Forum, which was organized by Uongozi Institute. Actually, we had a former president, Kappa, who was actually delivering his speech. And unfortunately, the power went off within the mic, and he wasn't actually distracted at all. He continued to deliver that speech until the mic went on when the power came back. So this is a vivid example on how best one should engage on delivering their speeches, but maintaining to not being distracted at all. Finding a style that works for you is very important, whether you're using your hands to speak or whether you are just having a dress code that actually gives you the enough confidence for you to speak. And this can be in different settings. You can have a different style in a rural community event or in a high level event. So what you represent actually really brings out that messages of people to actually concentrate to you and be able to engage with you easily. But also the rhythm of your tone. So this is part of your style of work. What style best works for you? How best are you able to change different tones within your engagement? And this rhythm of your tone actually depends on what particular community you're speaking to. If you're speaking to people from refugee camps, if you're speaking to children, or you're speaking with elder women and you're young, or even if you're speaking to senior officials, and you have to be able to communicate amicably in that tone that can be understandable, but yet be very, very specific to the message that you're about to deliver. And I think most of all is take every opportunity to speak. There are a lot of online speaking engagements nowadays coming up, a lot of opportunities to ask questions. You do not need to be a speaker in a panel for you to be able to practice your speaking skills, but you can ask questions. For instance, I have had a lot of opportunities where I'm also disregarded to actually even be pointed out to ask a question, but you should try to maximize the opportunities to speak in different events by asking different questions or contributing. You do not have to challenge always to a question, but contribute to something that can help that particular agenda. How can you move within your speaking modalities? How can you relay your message? So there's a familiar and really famous quote from the SEALs: slow is smooth and smooth is fast, and don't run the death. So ideally, nothing shows something more of our nerves if you're really racing through your presentation. Currently, the current speaking engagements always limit you to 5 minutes. or sometimes 10 minutes. But ideally, do not really rush to speak too fast, but also not very slow. Just focus on the key points that you want to deliver and keep on cementing on those points. This will help engage the audience in a meaningful way, but also make sure also what you really are relaying is actually heard. Making eye contact, this is something difficult, but also something really adoptable. And it can be easily maintained if you find a person in the audience who's there to support you, or just find a friendly face. I mostly look for friendly faces in different audiences that I can actually connect to. So it creates that connections to the people actually you're speaking to, instead of just reading directly to a written speech on a paper or facing the roof. Actually, majority of the people who read directly throughout their presentation on a speech that is written on a paper seems actually not connecting with the audience, because it's a written speech. Everyone will feel like it's just something that is jotted down and not something that reflects the reality that's happening or connecting to them within their personal experiences. Using humor and emotion, it's good actually, especially if you like set cracking jokes or just creating that a bit of a buzz and discussion. And why not connect to personal experiences? I mean, this creates a lot of neutrality. Majority of my speaking sessions, actually even my informal speaking sessions that I engage with, I often cite a personal experience in that particular area if it actually connects to it. You do not have to be fixed that you have to give out a personal experience. It could be an experience of someone else, you know, a friend, you know, or something you've witnessed in a society. So this creates that particular connection also with your audience, and it creates this I should I say an attention or something that attaches your speaking session to the audience, making the whole session connect together. But do not go over the allotted time, because ideally no one will really want to stay for so long listening to one face for a long time. Actually, it's always boring. And even for my case, when someone over speaks, I just lose concentration completely. And you'll just see people chatting on their phones and not really paying attention to what you're saying. But most of all, ask for feedback. Feedback is very, very important, because you need to know if what you actually said or actually presented does reflect with the people, does resonate. This is something that is key. And I think just to add on the feedback part is minding the choice of words and language you use to the audience that you're speaking to really, really matters, because you might use a lot of vocabularies that the audience you're speaking with do not understand, or you might use difficult English. I always keep it this, for my side, I always keep this a difficult English and actually simple English. So it really depends on what type of language you're using to the audience that you really want the audience to connect to you. Before I move to how to write successful applications, I'll just invite some of you, if you have any feedback to that particular part of public speaking, and then we can move ahead to tips on how to write the successful applications. Ideally, if you have any experience or anything that you're struggling with on public speaking, I mean, I would love to hear and be able to advise further.
Hi, Petrider.
Hello.
So I have a question about what you just spoke about. So I have been in leadership almost throughout my life, in secondary school, in high school, in university, and I've always had positions where I was supposed to be in front of my fellow students, in front of, you know, like the administration and stuff. And present my case.
Mm.
And a lot of what you've spoken is really important and it's really good. And some of the things I've been practicing. But one thing that I think is important that you mentioned and I have never tried to do is like practicing with distractions. So that's a really good thing, and I'll start trying that out. But what I want to ask is, you know that moment when okay, now you've stood and you're about to present your case and you start feeling like all cold and nervous, although like you've done this a lot of time, like I've done this a lot of time, but there's always that nervousness that you get before you start like presenting or like at the beginning of your presentation.
Mm.
How can a person like get past that?
I mean, Eliachi. I'm not sure if that's Eliachi. Okay. I mean,
Yeah.
I totally agree with you. I've done a lot of speaking engagements. I can't count how many, but everyone has that 5 seconds of fear. It
Yeah.
doesn't go off. The only way it will go off is how well you adopt to your fellow speakers. If either you're speaking with in a panel with 4 people, or how well you connect with your moderator. Sometimes I find that fear escaping from I looking at the moderator and actually trying to connect and thinking of what to respond, because majority of the speaking engagements I've engaged with are impromptu. So when I talk about impromptu speaking event is when you are just attending a session and someone just calls you, get up on the stage and speak about this topic. Or even some sessions that are actually happening right now online in Zoom. I didn't know that actually you can get scared in a Zoom event. So this is something I realized. I think that fear, that 5 seconds fear, always, it has to be there. You have to get scared. You have to feel like maybe I might not say something right. It actually does happen because you assess yourself with the current panelist that you're with. Because you might be in a panel with a very, very strong personalities, and you're like, my personality hasn't yet reached to that level, and you might be with strong influencers, but really majority of them, and this, I think this is something majority of the moderators have noticed, is each speaker, whenever they speak, they always have to ask you, how did I do? And this happened even in my previous session when I was actually a moderator for a session whereby there was a deputy ambassador of Egypt, and actually he was not only a deputy ambassador but also the deputy minister of foreign affairs. So ideally, I didn't think that would also mean that a person of that high rank will also ask me, how did it go? So it seems that whole fear and that whole anxiety within that 5 seconds is there. It's just something to adopt and just take it as a normal kind of feeling that, oh my gosh, am I going to do it? Okay, then just give it a pat on your back and say, I'm just going to nail it. I think that's the only thing that you should really keep in mind, because if you give yourself confidence, yes, there'll be people rooting for you, and obviously there'll be some people waiting for you to make a fool out of yourself. But if you give yourself confidence that you're going to do good, I think it all works out at the end.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So I'm going to move on to the next session. The next topic, if we don't have any particular question, and then we're going to proceed further so that we just keep in time, within the time frame. So just to share tips on how to write successful applications. To start this off, I mean, we've all sent applications, we've all been rejected sometimes, we've all received good news sometimes. And I mean, I'll take it also as an example of myself. I've sent over almost 100 applications when I was done with university looking for a job. And some never replied, some told me unfortunate, but others did actually recruit me. So how can one get that insights of writing successful applications. So when you're applying for something, you should actually make sure that something complements your skill set. What do you really want to do? And this is something you should assess yourself. For instance, I studied international relations. I ended up working much on gender issues. I did not study anything related to gender, but I adopted this based on interest, and then later it complemented itself within the framework of the international arena. So you should really look at what skill set and a particular application complements to you, whether it's a training opportunity, whether it's a job opportunity, or whether it's even a consultancy work. And you should also assess, are you applying it for the salary or recognition? I mean, if you're applying it to a salary, it's really okay, because at the end of the day, you can really just advance in your career to something that you really want to do, because we all have to make our ends meet and provide for our livelihood. And if you're applying something for a recognition, I want to win an award, or I want to just be recognized as maybe one of the 100 influential young leaders in Africa or something. I mean, it's also something really not bad, because you should not really judge yourself, particularly in something that you're applying for. If you really feel like your skill set and what you've been doing deserves recognition, you should actually go for it. And when you go for it, give it your all. I mean, showcase what you've done within that particular work. Do not just send an application which is shallow. Majority of people send shallow applications. And I've been also part of the review teams of different applications. You'll find a person has potential, but unfortunately has really shallow submissions, and this, I don't know, this is where we take advantage of what we are capable of or not. I mean, the next tip will be more focusing on how do you best do your research on that particular institution. So if you're applying for a job, let's say in an embassy, in an regional bloc, SADC, EAC, ECOWAS, or even in a think tank, or just a normal NGO or INGO, you should really do a research on what they're doing and what their main priority areas within the programs that they're delivering. And this should actually help you within your cover letter, because you have to actually state what you're really applying for to reflect what the organization is really doing. And this will help you actually maintain that feeling of actually the person is really interested in our institution, or is really interested in joining our team. And majority of job applications nowadays focus on different competency questions. So I'll take this as a big challenge, because I was also taught this, how to best reply to competency questions, how best to be able to offer that feedback that will actually stand out. There are often guidelines on how to respond to each competency question within some job applications, but others do not have guidelines. So ideally, whatever, in a competency question, a good example of it is, for instance, what skill are you going to bring on board within this job role? So you actually are going to reflect what you've done previously, and also do a personal reflection of a situation where you faced a particular challenge and solved it. And this can be even from university level, or even in a community, or even in the house. It doesn't have to be a particular experience that you faced in an institution. Because this creates that feeling that this person is a person who can handle different challenging situations, whether at home, whether in the community, or even in the working space. But most of all, be able to answer all questions. Do not leave any question blank. If you plan to leave any question blank, do not apply for whatever you're applying for at all. And if you have a published work, actually do go for it. And this will make your work have credibility and stand out. Some of the recent applications for fellowships, or let's say online opportunities to be an advisor, or an engagement person, can even have almost like 5 segments, 5 sections, which can be very tiresome. Even the Mandela Washington, for instance, it has a lot of extensive segments to apply for. So, I mean, how best do you actually take your time to invest to apply for each question? You do not have to finish your application within 30 minutes. You can always save it and go back to it. Just make sure you submit it within the allocated deadline. Do not wait for the final day. That's the main key point. But if you're really have no choice, you could wait until the final day to submit, if in case you were really tied up. Above all, choose appropriate referees. Referees can break you, disorient you, or they can either root for you. So if you choose the right referees, also do remind on notifying them that you have kept them for this particular reference within this particular job role that you applied. Do not feel shy to tell someone you've kept them in their job application that you applied, or an opportunity, even if you have a job. I mean, some people are actually embarrassed to look for another job and inform their referees just because they have another job. I mean, it's part of career growth. You're not a tree. You do not have to stay one place. If you find a better opportunity, go for it, apply for it. And it's an opportunity for you also to grow as a personal and as an individual. Do remember to do final checks. Final checks is very important, to check that you have everything in place, to check that you haven't written the wrong address, and this will actually help you to see if there's any errors that you've made. And above all, I think you should have more time to actually review your CV mostly, because for instance, for my case, I adopt and update my CV based on the particular role I am applying for, because I've done a lot of engagement, so I'm trying to make sure everything blends in within that particular time. I think these are the main tips for a successful applications from my end that I had to share today, and looking at on the time. So if anyone has any particular questions for this particular session, you can share, and then we can probably share different experiences.
Hello. Hi, Petrider.
Hello.
I have a question on writing successful application. So right now I've not on job offers, but still trying to. Okay, I'm using my audio. So right now I'm still trying to finish my undergraduate degree in law. So I'm focused on, let's say, online opportunities, or like collaborate with my degree and all that. So my question is, this, especially during this COVID-19, where we have virtual interviews and all that, how do you scale virtual interviews? Because from personal experiences, I have a terrible experience with virtual interviews, and it's let's say for example, an opportunity to represent the African Union at the G20 and dropping out at the last stage because of the virtual interview, which is so frustrating. So what would you give as tips and ideas on scaling virtual interviews for all of us? Thank you.
I mean, just to reply to you, Oluwadamilola, and then someone else can chip in also to ask what they have to ask. I mean, for virtual interviews, I mean, I've done one virtual interview within this period of COVID-19. It really depends with the person who's hosting the interview. So they have to actually provide with you probably a link. My interview was with a Zoom link, so I did an interview via Zoom, but I also did a written interview but ideally, how do you do a written interview? I know online, right? So I did it through the allocated time. So a test exercise was sent to me, and I was given 2.5 hours to accomplish it. So ideally, the people who sent me and I have to monitor the time. And this was based on each one's agreement. Like I was available on this particular time. So you should really look at also how do you confirm a time that you are able to concentrate particularly only on that interview that you plan to do. And I actually did the virtual also interview. It went really, actually it was really short and clear. Basically, you have to also ensure you have good internet access, or you are seated in an area where there's good internet within the house, so as the interview can go smoothly. And I mean, an interview is an interview. I got scared within the virtual interview. So I think an interview is always I think it's the word interview that gives you also that bit of a worry, but all in all, it really went well. So it's all about how best and which platform do you use to schedule the interview, whether it's the Zoom or Blue Jeans or Google Meet app. So that's my advice from my end.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Do we have any feedback from anyone?
Yeah, hi. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, so my name is Tinuan from Nigeria, and I'd like to say this is my first time of speaking all through the mentorship program we've been having so far. First of all, I'd like to say thank you so much, Mrs. Petrider. I sincerely appreciate this opportunity. I'd like to say something about the previous presentation, which was on public presentation, and I just wanted to say one or two things about that, which has helped me thus far. I'm this kind of person that is sort of shy, in particular speaking to people in public, and I knew that if I wanted to go so far in life, in general, I knew that I had to do something about it. So what I did was I did a research online.
I don't think we can hear you.
I got cut off.
Okay, it's fine.
Connection. I'm back on. Apologies about that. So, as I mentioned, I had the issue of public presentation, and so when I did a research online, I came across Toastmasters. Toastmasters Club. So what I did was to join one of the clubs in Lagos State, and it really helped me because it's a scenario where you have to, there's a guide, there's a booklet we all use, and you have to make presentations to everybody, and everyone would judge you, give you feedbacks, where to improve, and then you're being taught hands-on what to do, how to relate to your public. You mentioned something about eye contact and every other thing. We were being, and also rehearsing, because you'll be given like 5 to 7 minutes to, present a speech. And it really helped me a whole lot. It helped me to sort of hold the butterflies in my stomach and, the nervousness, being able to control it. And I would advise everyone to just Google up Toastmasters and look for whichever the branch in your particular country of residence, and try and join the club after this post-COVID-19 era. It will really help you in boosting your public presentation ahead of when you have to do some sort of presentation, maybe in front of the board of directors or in public or at a conference or something like that in general. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. I think it's very important for all of us to know. And I mean, it's really good that you actually shared that. I mean, everyone does get a platform where they never had. I mean, I never used to speak mostly in public speaking events, but I think my rehearsal started in university a lot, because I used to really try to be part of the presenters within the class to ensure that I have a segment or even a paragraph just to present. So you get to adapt and get comfortable at public speaking a lot when you just keep on practicing. Do we have any last comments? So I'll just did Eliash want to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question, but just a simple question about referees. Is it must or is it necessary for a referee to be someone who knows you personally, or just even someone who knows your work?
I mean,
But not
anyone who knows your work, or anyone who you know in an institution that knows your work and can be able to vouch for you, you can keep as your referee. I mean, you can even keep your mentor as a referee, as long as that person is part of the list of people that actually knows your work. Some people ask your former employees if you could find anyone who can be your referee. I mean, in an institution there can be 50 people. I'm sure there's a good apple who can be your referee. It doesn't have to be someone who, you know, like, oh, this person has will probably ruin my whole referee experience. So I think it's just really depends who best you choose. And I take it also this as a personal experience. For an institution I got a job for once, and actually part of the interviewers who was working there told me I should choose my referees carefully, because there was an issue with one of the referee person I had kept. So that was an experience also for me, and I totally removed the person after that. So I think it's a learning moment for everyone.
okay. Thank you.
Just to wind up, because it's almost 3, I have within this presentation I'm going to share it. I kept